Hello and a very warm welcome to this latest edition of Talking Germany, the show where we do just that. And my guest today is a man who is both a very successful scientist, his specialist field being neuroscience, and a very feisty controversialist. And here is that man in person, Manfred Spitzer. Thank you very much for joining us today here on Talking Germany, coming all the way from the south of Germany up to Berlin. Great to have you here. Now, aside from being one of Germany's leading brain researchers, Manfred Spitzer has also made a name for himself by arguing, and I think arguing is really the word, that too much time spent using computers, mobile phones and the internet will lead to what he calls digital dementia. Digital dementia. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I'd like to start with a question that you might not quite expect. What is your favourite novel?
That's a good question. I liked The Swarm.
The Swarm? Mm-hmm. Explain what the novel's about.
Well, it's about oceans and oceanography and and catastrophes that happen because the marine animals basically want to get rid of human beings because human beings are not good for the earth.
Okay, you've convinced me about your favourite novel. The reason I'm asking, it's a bit of a cheeky question, is because I'm wondering, you're a neuroscientist and you're also somebody who's very much involved in the social discourse by writing books that are best-selling books. How much time do you actually have for reading?
Not a lot.
Not a lot.
I have to confess, when I have spare time, free time, Sunday afternoons, I read Science and Nature.
You read Science and Nature,
yes.
Not novels?
For fun.
For fun?
For fun, yes. And I love it. Okay. I really love reading scientific journals for fun.
Okay. The reason I'm asking you all this is because I am a little bit of a bookish person myself, and sometimes I feel a little bit old-fashioned being a bookish person these days. And while I was researching for the show, reading about all the things that you're interested in, I came up with a very, very interesting quote. The quote is from Eric Schmidt of Google, the chairman of Google. And what he said was, Eric Schmidt worries about the sort of overwhelming rapidity of information, the especially stressful information that we're getting, that it is moving us away from reading, that we are losing the habit of reading. That had an incredible effect on me. It made me very sad, and I know that's the kind of thing that you're very, very interested in. Tell me more.
Well, I empathize with what Eric Schmidt said, and I think he's also right on target, emphasizing that it's a lack of control. Whenever your digital gadget kind of calls upon you, you have to do this and you have to do that. And so it takes over control of your life. And this is what people mean when they say information overload. From a brain standpoint, you cannot overload your brain. It shuts down itself. I mean, there's a certain amount the brain can handle, and if there's more, it just doesn't do it. Yeah. But you can always have the feeling, I should do more, and I should do this and that and that. And I'm not in control of all the things that happen. And this is exactly the same thing as, and in fact, it's identical to stress. Mm-hmm. Stress is not the adversary that happens to you. Stress is the lack of control. Mm-hmm. And there are even animal experiments in rats showing this. A rat in a cage who can avoid shocks by pressing a lever when a lamp lights up. And when you do this, the rat will learn how to do it, and it will eventually it'll be slow, and so sometimes it will get a shock. Now you have a second rat in another room, and that rat gets a shock when this one gets one. Mm-hmm. But it can't avoid it. It just gets a shock. So it hangs out and gets shocks eventually. Now, which of the two animals will get stress symptoms from ulcers to high blood pressure to eventually death? It's not that one who's paying attention and tries to avoid. No, it's that one. Because that one thinks, I can do whatever I want, I get punished eventually. And this is what stress is all about. And this is increased by digital media. And this is not good for your health.
Okay. You have been linked with this term digital dementia, yeah? You didn't coin the term yourself. Where did you get it from originally?
Korean scientists and doctors. Korean doctors noticed about 6 years ago, that there are a lot of young men coming up and saying, well, I can't concentrate, I tend to forget things, and I feel a bit like burnout, and they coined the term digital dementia because these symptoms are symptoms of dementia, and because these young men always told, well, I spend a lot of time with computers and a lot of my free time with computers. So it was Korean doctors who coined the term.
So it's widespread in Korea, it's widespread in South Korea, which is a very digitally connected society.
Oh, yes.
What about Germany? How widespread is the problem that you identify here in Germany?
Well, almost as widespread as in any developed country, and well, South Koreans are probably the most advanced in this respect. Just to give you a figure, the latest numbers of internet and computer addiction from South Korea is 20% of the young folks. And this is not my data, this data from their Ministry of Health. In Germany, we have maybe 2, 3 or 4%. They have 20. That's really amazing, and it's way up. And since my book about digital dementia, it came out in South Korea, and they were the first to have it translated. Yeah. And after that, I got mail from South Korea and saying, well, we have now a movement, it's called 111, and it's about young Korean people saying, okay, we agree to shut off our phone 1 day a week for 1 hour. They need a campaign for that, okay, to shut it off for 1 hour, 1 day a week.
Okay. Well, tell me this. Your university institute in Ulm, in the southwest of Germany, where you work, I know you do a lot of research, neuro research, but you also do clinical work with people who are, acutely addicted to new media. I think that's a fair way of putting it. Yeah.
Well, I'm the head of a run-of-the-mill psychiatry.
Yeah.
And
so tell me what that's like. Tell me what kind of pattern that is. Somebody who is addicted to new media.
Well, the ones that I see are the worst cases because we are an acute hospital. So whenever somebody really decompensates mentally, he's brought to my hospital. And I've seen young men in their 20s, late 20s. That's, by the way, the standard. They are in their late 20s. They lost their job. They lost their apartment. They lost all their friends. They play 18 hours of World of Warcraft a day. They have the waste bucket next to the computer, so they don't have to go to the toilet. And you ask them, do you have friends? Yes. Have you ever met them? No. And their lives is complete ruined. And they come to the closed ward. So they are locked up for a week or two, and they agree with that because they know that's their only chance. And it's really amazing because once you take away the digital stuff, they have no way to cope, and they get sort of symptoms of cold turkey, if you like, and it's really not a fun thing. I've talked to people and say, "Oh, Dr. Spitzer, don't worry. I mean, these people, they would have been alcoholics in the past, or they would consume other drugs. Now they do computers." No, it's the computer that's the problem in their case, and it's really a bad problem.
Okay. Addiction is part of the human condition. There's no doubt about that. But what you're describing is indeed depressing, without a doubt. There is another side. There's a tension here, though, because there's another side to the story. You rail, you curse, you damn new media, But the use of it and the side. 1 second, the side effects you say are very, very dangerous. But a new study, done by the Max Planck Institute here in Germany, the Max Planck Institute for Human Development, also by the prestigious Charité Hospital, has just come out, and it says video gaming causes increases in the brain regions responsible for spatial orientation, memory formation, and strategic planning, as well as fine motor skills. That's quite a package. It makes me think I need more video gaming in my life.
Well, first of all, I'd like to read the study. Second, I'd like to know who sponsored the study.
Can there be anything in it for you?
Yes. When you do a lot of, let's say, shooting down space invaders, you get faster, just as the British... the son of the Queen said...
Prince Harry.
He was so good in his helicopter because he has trained himself with the video games. Yes, but you are getting better at reflex-like action. You're not getting better at planning. That's one thing. You're not getting better at cognitive control. That is, doing what you really want to do, pursuing aims, and go after your goals in life. You're not getting better at that. You're getting worse at that. People sometimes argue. Let me give you this. People sometimes argue. Well, if I'm getting better at getting this bad guy and that bad guy because they come from all over the place and my attention is all over the place. I say yes, but then you are training your attention to be all over the place. Another word for that is not being able to concentrate, because concentrating involves you having your attention here and not here and here and here. And in fact, there's one paper that even came out in the British Science Journal of Nature, where the author argues that you increase attention because you lose the ability to focus on something. Well, this is called not being attentive, even though the author turns it around and says, well, you are better at getting all the stuff in the periphery.
Yeah, but one of the things that it's one of your hobby horses. You get very sort of angry when you talk about multitasking and the impact of multitasking sometimes. And
humans can't. But
you say humans can't. But I mean, in the comfort of my own home, I cook a meal, I listen to music, I chat to a friend, and that's called relaxation for me. And I'm doing three different things at the same time.
It's not multitasking. Multitasking in a strict sense. Of course, people can do all kinds of things at the same time. That's not what multitasking in a strict sense is about. And let me tell you why I think multitasking in a strict sense is at issue. Because when we deal with digital media, we deal with narrative, we deal with words, we deal with content, with meaning. And what human brains cannot do, what human beings cannot do, is follow two stories at the same time. There's a reason why here's nobody sitting and talking to you at the same time as I'm doing, because you couldn't cope with two people talking with two people. That's not possible. And in psychology, there are experiments showing that if you try, your performance gets worse. Nobody reads two books at the same time because you can't. And if you do for an hour, you got less than if you had read half an hour this book and half an hour that book. I mean, that's shown 100 times. So that type of multitasking, doing two contents at the same time, consciously, is not even for women, okay? It's not possible. So, and that's what computers demand of you, and which is why the New York Times reported in 2009 that the US economy loses $650 billion a year because all the employees try multitasking and their performance gets worse.
Manfred Spitzer, tell me again, in your own words, why the early phase, the early years of a child's education are so very, very important.
Well, the brain doesn't come ready-made when you're born. It comes with the possibility of development, and that development happens only if you have, stimuli. And most importantly, it's not just colors and sounds. It is coordinated stimuli. That is, this is a glass, and I can do this. So I feel it, I hear it, I have the touch, and I could have smell if it was something else, and et cetera, et cetera. And I see it, of course. So, and babies need this holistic type of input because the baby's brain kind of learns how to listen in seeing and all the senses. Their input is brought together in the baby's brain, and which is how the baby learns how the world is and how it works. If you give the baby just the image of it and maybe a bit sound, and the image is here and the sound is there, the baby's brain won't be able to combine that. It can only combine it if it's really here and the same. Which is why it's so important to have babies interact with the real world rather than the digital version of it. And that cannot, in no way, in us adults, yes, but in babies, in no way can the digital input replace the real world, which is why it's almost a crime to have a baby or put it in front of an iPad and have it swipe because it's as in the little film we saw. You have to use your hand because you learn to come to grips with something, and this is really important. It's using your hand it's the greatest tool and the great sense organ, and that builds up our brain. It builds up the connections, and this is what you and I use when we talk and feel, and which doesn't get its full development when you interact too much with the digital world.
Okay, so
which is why digital media are not good. The younger you are, the worse they are.
So we need feeling, touching, active stimuli for young children, for the youngest children. Exactly. On the other hand, what we learnt in that report as well is that fear, and we come back to the same word you used earlier, stress. Fear and stress are a block to creativity.
Yes, and to learning.
How does that work? Well,
stress kills neurons, that's one thing. And so that's very bad for learning. And fear associates, well, you know, if something really frightening goes on, it's not good when you relax and think of possible solutions. I mean, those who did that in our past, they got eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. So when that thing is around, you better run and think of nothing but running, okay? Which is why fear shuts off remote associations, shuts off our whole remotely thought processes. We only think of one thing. So fear interferes with creativity. It basically shuts down creative thoughts. So if you want to be creative, you must be fearful, for one thing. If you want to teach somebody something that the person will be able to use creatively later on, you must not use anxiety or fear in training, because if you learn something under fear, you basically save the fear together with the input, and then you will recall the fear with the input, and then you'll be not able to use that input creatively. So if you teach and you use anxiety and you threaten people, you can just as well just don't teach, because what you teach will not be of any use.
That's interesting, because that would be my next question. To what extent are the lessons you've just been teaching me about good education? Yes. You are one of the leading, experts in the field of brain research in Germany. You're also a voice in the field of sort of education and what have you, yeah?
Yes.
To what extent are those lessons that you're outlining here being applied in German schools, or not?
They're not.
They're not?
They're not, no. But
why not?
Well, I think good teachers know about these things, and they do it because they realize by doing it that it's really not good to threaten children or to put pressure on them. But the system does. And that's why many teachers kind of get symptoms of stress and get depressed, because they realize within the system that they are in, they have a hard time realizing good teaching and good learning, because the system puts a lot of pressure onto the kids, which is not good for learning.
Okay. You've mentioned it in passing a wee little bit, computers in schools, yeah? Everybody, it's a commonplace, everybody says we need computers in schools because that is where, the digital world is the world where we're doing business these days, it's where we're having ideas, it's where we're creating jobs, so we need computers in schools at an early age. You say no.
Exactly.
Why?
My point is this. In order to use computers, you need to have one thing, that's knowledge. Take Google. When you do a Google search, you do not need to know anything about computers, because you know how to use Google. You click on the browser, and then there's this, and then you type in your question. If you know nothing, you have no question, so you need not Google anyway. But if you know a bit, Google is it's not very useful, simply because you have to know a lot when Google throws 10,000 hits at you once in half a second or so. Because once Google has answered your question, then it's you to filter out the wheat from the chaff. And you can only do this by knowing something. The more you know, the better you are able to use Google. Now, how does knowledge come into my brain, or into the brains of young people? And now the point is not using Google, because we know, and there's a nice science paper out in 2011, researchers from Harvard and Columbia showed that if you use Google to acquire knowledge, you tend to forget that. Simply because your brain thinks, oh, well, I can Google that. And there's little incentive to memorize, okay? When you read a book, I don't carry this with me all the time, so I better memorize this.
Okay.
So just to make the argument, if if you need knowledge to Google, and if Google is not good for knowledge acquisition, then there's one thing you must not do in schools, that is use Google.
What age would you allow computers to be introduced into German schools? If the education minister came and said, give me an age that would be...
Well, 18 would, be on
the,
18 would be the safe side.
18 would be the safe.
The PISA data show that a computer, if you give a 15-year-old a computer, his school grades will be worse, will get worse. We know that. So 15 is too young. And we have other data showing that, okay? Anything else is advertisement and public PR by the computer industry. I know that many people in education will say we need computers at an early age, but there's absolutely no evidence that this does any good to the education of kids. No evidence. In fact, in Silicon Valley, there's a Waldorf school, and it advertises we have no computers here, and all the computer giants' bosses, kids go to this school because it's a good school. They do theater and music and sports, and this is what young people need. Computers is what they don't need. So if you ask me what's the early age, well, 18, we are adult and we can do it. 18 is too old maybe, and 15 is too young. So between 15 and 18, and if you think about it, that makes probably a lot of sense.
Another one of your specialities, music. Music and the brain, yeah? Why is music so good for the kind of learning that we've just been listening to, hearing about?
For a lot of reasons. Actually, what we do know by now is that musical training enhances your IQ. That it's not the Mozart effect, but it's definitely giving you a few points in IQ, which has been shown by controlled studies. So we do know that, and we also know that music regulates your affect in a sort of a middle range way, so it's able to swing up and down, which is what you need for learning, to attach, well, good and bad to things. You need your emotions going up and down, and if that happens, and it happens with music, that's a good thing. Music is stimulating for your entire brain. We do not have a music center if the whole brain lights up when you do music, so you train your brain in quite a few respects when you practice music. Active is better than passive, but passive has a few effects too. So music is a great thing for your brain, absolutely, yes.
And it was interesting what one of the guys said in that report. He said, the more I learn, the easier it gets. That's interesting. Yeah?
Well, this is how elderly people, and with that I mean everyone over 17, roughly, learn. I mean, think about it. Our brains learn quickly when we are young. Everyone knows that. And then you get older, and then you learn much slower. But the interesting thing is this. Who can learn a second or a language better? Well, those people, he who knows already 5. And who can learn a musical instrument? But he who knows already 5. So the brain is a strange thing. A hard drive, if it's half full, it has only half the space. But our brain, the more is in there, the better you learn. So it's kind of a paradox storage device. The more it's there, the more fits in, okay? Which is why you need a lot of being in there to be a lifelong learner. That is, if you are 17 and nothing's in there, you will have a hard time learning at all.
It's interesting what you're saying there, because I did come across another, when I was reading up on all this, I came across another quote that interested me an awful lot from a Dutch educationalist, a woman called Rieneke Smilde. She said, lifelong learning, what you're talking about, is about navigating in a changing world.
Right.
What do you make of that?
Yeah, that's a good idea, or a good way to phrase it. And I would even say it's really important to know that world. I mean, to stick with this metaphor, and you better know the world already, the better you are at navigating in the future. And the more you know, the more you can learn. So no one has ever argued, well, I know 5 languages, so my language centers are full. Yeah. I'm not capable of learning a 6th. I mean, it sounds even funny if to say this. So that shows you that our brains are really different from any other storage device.
It's interesting, though, because we're talking about lifelong learning, and you said you want to keep computers out of the classroom, away from kids pretty much through to age 18 or maybe. But for the elderly, yeah, learning to use a computer and doing so, actually using the computer and the social media and all the possibilities that exist, is a great thing. It can be for my mother, it's liberating, and that's very typical for that kind of experience.
Yes. Yeah? I would never deny an elderly person to learn how to use a computer for, well, writing letters and having social exchanges and all that. I mean, learning for elderly people is good, and learning to use a computer is just one instance of learning, and so that's not bad at all. I'm just saying there are risks and side effects with the kids and the adolescents, and these risks and side effects are huge. And that's all I'm saying.
You're a brain researcher, and you're somebody who knows how much we've achieved or not achieved in the battle that preoccupies many people in an aging society, the battle against dementia. Is that a battle that can be won in any way, or do we simply have to accept that in an aging society that's going to be it's going to be a facet of our lives?
Well, yes and no, as we Germans say. Yeah. For one thing, brains do deteriorate with age. And then on top of that, there are a lot of diseases that kill brain cells, like Alzheimer's, like infarctions or whatever. But the important point is, one, you don't need your entire brain to function. Brains have the feature of graceful degradation.
That's an interesting phrase.
Yeah, it's called, that's a technical term, graceful degradation. And the opposite is crash. I mean, computers crash. Brains don't crash. They degrade gracefully. That is, you lose half of your neurons and you don't notice it. And and let's take Parkinson's disease. You notice you have something is strange with your motor capabilities when 70% of the neurons that die in Parkinson's is already dead. Okay, that's graceful degradation. And same thing with Alzheimer's disease. You can use half of your neurons, you're perfectly fine. And then if more goes down the tubes, then all of a sudden you will get symptoms of dementia. But the more developed, connected, trained up your brain is, the higher you are in your mental capability, the longer it takes if dementia means mental decline. Okay, which is why we need that training as young people to avoid dementia in old age. And let me give you an example. If you know 2 languages and you get Alzheimer's, you get it 5 years later. So that you got early training and you use those 2 languages, and then you get your Alzheimer's. There are 3 studies out on hundreds of people showing this in several countries. Always the same thing, 5 years. A second language gives you 5 years dementia-free life if you get Alzheimer's.
Manfred Spitzer, the reason why we're running this report on the show is because you grew up in what the Germans call a Großfamilie, an extended family, and you now have a very big family yourself. Let's talk about the one you grew up in first. What was it like?
We were 9 people, 2 grandmothers, father and mother, and we were 5 children. And there were always 9 people. I mean, it's really amazing when we had let's say, Christmas or celebrated New Year's Eve or something. That was us. Old pictures where I'm dancing with my grandmother, and I was that. But that was just how life was, and it was good. It was really good.
It made you into the person you are, I think.
Certainly, yes.
I'm guessing because there must have been sort of levels of communication that were very interactive.
Yes. Yes, and a lot of occasions for humor or for interesting things or doing things. It was never boring. I mean, there always was something going on. Sure, yes, and that's how life is, and that's how I like it. Yes.
And now you have 6 kids of your own.
Well, I have to say I had 5, and they are now all grown up. Yeah. Now I have a 6th one, and she's 5, and but. With those 5 kids, yeah, we had a lot of fun. Of course, it's not easy, but I would definitely do it over again, like we did.
I envy you. I have 2 kids myself, and if I could live my life again, I would like to have more kids. Yeah, for sure. But in that report, what we learned is that many people here in Germany, they wag their finger at you, or they frown at you, or whatever, for having this big family. That's what it said in that report. Is that true?
Well, I experienced that in the US. I tended to say, well, we are neither dumb nor fundamentally religious when I was asked how many kids I have. So, really, and because that was the suspicion. But it never happened in Germany, probably because Germany was a country with extended families, and that happened only in the last decades that our birth rate really went.
And when you talk about suspicion, at least what people think when they see big families, like somebody like you with your 6 kids in tow, I think probably what most people think these days is he must be relatively well off. Because it's normally people who are relatively well off who can afford to have big families these days. I think there's been a sort of a shift there, no?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the story. When I was claiming the right to be a father of my 6th child because I wasn't married with the mother, I went to the agency and the woman flipped through my charts and said, well, this is your 6th child. And she was thinking this must be the hit-and-run person. And then she, professor? So she really didn't know what to make out of this. That was she was kind of confused.
I see.
So yes, there is this attitude against people with many kids, but I think in general, people are for extended families, definitely, in Germany, yes.
Okay, I certainly am. We like to ask our guests to bring along something interesting, something cherished, a possession of theirs, and you have chosen to bring along that thing down there.
It's my little pocket clarinet, also called chalumeau. I built it. And I like doing these things, working with wood. And
you built it yourself, yeah?
Yes, yes. You take a piece of wood.
It's unusual for a neuroscientist to be engaged in handicrafts, yeah?
Well, maybe, I don't know. But it's fun to do this. I mean, it's really fun. And, well, let me try to get something out of it.
Ah, good.
Well, anyway,
very nice.
It sounds like a clarinet, you know.
It does. Time is ticking away. I'd like to ask you the following question, because we've talked about it in general. Give me one tip for how, in our lives in general, young and old, we can remain, also in terms of our brains and our emotional activity, fit, healthy and active.
Be together.
Be together.
Loneliness is the major killer. Yes, be together, old and young together, that's really what helps you a lot. Not crossword puzzles and no Sudoku. Get yourself a young kid and a grandchild. A grandchild is a lifesaver and the thing against Alzheimer's.
Okay, one more question. We normally have a quiz at the end of the show, but I'm more interested in this question. How much of the brain is still undiscovered?
A lot. A lot.
We'll leave it at that, yeah? That is your lot with the eloquent and controversial Manfred Spitzer. There's more Talking Germany, including my blog and our archive on the website. You might also like to watch the German version of the show with my colleague, Hayo Schumacher. If you've enjoyed today's show as much as I have, come back next week. Bye-bye. Tschüss.